right, everyone. I want to welcome back Cassandra and Donald Whyte. We're going to get started with our Ute panel here today. You heard from them earlier for introductions, so we're going to kind of get right into the questions here. And Donald has some interactive components. Don, please be careful with those stairs as you're going up and down. He has a map here that he's going to incorporate, as well as a rope tying line that you all will see be kind of created back there in that open space. And so let's go ahead and get our waters. I have the first question to ask you all. If you would like to start us off, maybe Cassandra can go first, and then we'll have Dawn follow. Okay. So the first question is on Colorado state history. How have the actions of the state of Colorado, forest removal, broken treaties, and extraction of land and resources shaped the conditions Ute communities live with today?
That's a loaded question. And there's a lot of components that go with this. So the actions of the state of Colorado is that when it was a territory, Ute people were here. The Jicarilla Reservation is right next to the Southern Ute Indian Reservation. It's in northern New Mexico, but it borders that. Apache in our language means, we used to call the Apaches our shadows, because they were right there with us. Because the Jicarillas and the Apaches, that what we did as Ute people, we roamed all this territory here before Colorado was the state of Colorado. So that forest removal is crazy because it makes people think that Ute people decided one day that they were going to get up and they didn't want to live in Denver or Colorado Springs area or Woodland Park, and that we just went ahead and decided to go live in a dry desert area in the southeast corner that we put there. It makes people think that today. And it's such a lack that people don't even understand that live in Colorado, that there are Ute people, and that there are two tribes that live within the state, two reservations that are there. I've met plenty of people that done that. So forest removal has put us out of the eye of mainstream society. Forest removal has put us on a reservation that was deserted land that they didn't know that had resources underneath it. And yes, the Southern Ute Indian tribe is an oil and gas developing reservation, and we have development in our growth fund that makes and a financial plan. But that growth fund makes the money for us through the oil and gas development. And we've had to do that, but we've also had to contend with fracking and cross drilling and everything like that, horizontal drilling and things like that, so other people won't steal the oil from that and locate their oil wells right next to the reservation. But a part of that is also looking back, and what they're beginning to do is look at about the sustainability. How are we putting back what we have? Because now we're forced to be sedentary. Ute people were not sedentary. We lived and moved around the landscape. I don't want to say nomadic, but because that's not entirely true. But we moved along the landscape with the seasons and the animals, and we're there. And there are some times that we would move to our neighboring tribes. The Muoch and the Caputas lived along the San Luis Valley, and in the San Luis Valley area, and would move up into Salida and into Buena Vista and go up to Leadville and that way into Glenwood Springs. The Muoch lived along the Front Range of Colorado Springs and Denver area, and down into the San Luis Valley, down into Trinidad, and all the way down into to Tucumcari. And Tucumcari is a Ute word. Tucarum is black, and Cari is hill. So if you ever been to Tucumcari, New Mexico, when you get there, you can see that blackness that was there, and that was part of our trade route. And that was a trade route that we would utilize up and down this area. But forest removal made us sedentary, so we weren't able to move along the landscape that we used to. Weren't able to go to Ouray, weren't able to go to Glenwood Springs and these different places. And what that did was it created a havoc on the lands, on the natural resources. The natural resources are cultural resources. They're one and the same. So we're trying to you need to look at things holistically. like a WH holistically and an HO holistically. So that way you're doing that. And that way you're thinking about what you're putting back on the land. What are we saving? Because when you stay someplace, you start depleting resources. You deplete your sage plants, you deplete your willow plants, you deplete your minerals that are also there. So we have to figure out ways to do that in order to live in a modern world. So that extraction has shaped how we live. Yes, we get banaka or dividend that comes with it. But at the same time that we're getting that dividend, we're also like being told, you know, be happy with that, but we're not. So we're living in a white man's world where we're thinking about material things and our culture and our language. It kind of went to the wayside because we're too busy being forward thinking, too busy being progressive. And sometimes that word progressive is a double-edged sword. And that's double-edged sword, so you have to be careful what you're cutting and how you're swinging it and yielding it, because you tend to forget about certain things. So we're trying to play catch up now. All of us are. That's why we're here talking about cultural resources and sustainability and climate resiliency, because we have to practice those things on the own planes, because we're all sedentary now. We don't move upon the land. And our conditions are that shaped us with that boarding, shaped us through boarding school and what the federal government did to us. But that doesn't mean that it stopped us from being who we are and our identity. So our communities are trying to thrive. They're still thriving. Our communities live because some of our people live outside the reservation. And that's okay, because you still go home. They always tell you, go get educated. Go on, go outside, go get educated and come back. But your education is not just contingent upon a degree. Your education is also your life. We're all experts here if you have your cultural knowledge. Not everybody has what you know. You don't know. They don't know how to prepare those medicines the way that your grandma did, the way that she showed you how to do it. So those things are things that do, but we have to keep them and carrying them along today. So that's how I want to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Donald, would you like to add to that?
Can you hear me? Oh, I guess not. There we go. We'll just go with this one. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I guess, okay. Forest removal. We were well aware of these actions long before the state of Colorado became the state in 1876. I was down at the Battle of Washita, the Park Service unit down there, but the site of just a tremendous traumatic tragedy and event that gone on. And as you read the material and interpretation or understanding the land, and I learned that it was in Nebraska, a certain fight up there in 1854, where a military commander had decided that they were going to make a move on the tribes in that area. And you got to keep in mind, this was intentional, and the policy of the U.S. government of, again, trying to figure out what to do with the Indians, because ever since the beginning of contact way back in the 1500s, dealing with learned people in Spain had gathered, there's always been this thing called the Indian problem. We hear it from the East Coast to the West Coast, the Indian problem. Well, the Indian problem came into our world in the 1850s, and it came to our brothers that lived, sisters that lived on the Great Plains, because those were the first few fights. But keep in mind, even though we're Utes and we live in our general area, we communicate with other tribal groups. So we heard of these things: Summit Springs, Sand Creek, the Battle of Washita. We knew that we were within the pathway of this expansion. Forest removal, very much a goal of this state and of the territory. Treaties that are broken, well, treaties that weren't recognized, actually. Once they were passed in Washington, D.C. They had no impact on the residents here within the community of what we know as today as Colorado, because even before those treaties were signed, I can tell you, over there at the community of Meeker, the Indian agency over there, we had an initial Indian agent representing and advocating for the White River Ute band over there. They were sending notes to Washington, D.C. about settlers, miners, people coming onto their land, to Ute land that had been designated in a treaty before, that the surveyors got wrong. That they actually placed the Ute land 17 miles south of the original boundary and a few miles south of the community of Meeker and the Indian Agency. So confusion. And people just kept coming and settling into areas that was not their land. But they didn't pay attention. The Utes were well aware of this because they were out there also adjusting. They were going out to trading posts. There were 4 in that general area out there, and they were buying firearms. They were buying ammo. So by the time Nathan Meeker shows up, and this thing leads on to what they call the White River Incident or Meeker Massacre, he was writing to Washington, D.C., complaining that the Utes were not staying on the reservation and they were going to these trading posts because they were gathering the supplies and goods necessary to protect themselves. One note I read that the trader had sold over 10,000 rounds of ammo. So the Utes, because of what happened in the Great Plains, were well aware was what was coming. The Utes defend their homeland aggressively because it is their homeland, just like any one of us who own private property. We want to make sure that our rights are protected, and we will defend that property. No different than the Utes. I own private property down near the community of Ignacio. I'm also a rancher. I know my reservation. My own Ute tribe owns private property near Gunnison. So I'm aware of the value and importance of owning that, but imagine these people coming and taking your land and not paying attention to their leaders. That's important. The extraction of land and resources. Terriol Mine, or Terriol Creek, was up near Como, Colorado, on the road 285 between Buena Vista and Bailey. That's where the first strike of gold occurred, and the people came in. They talked about the first 8 miners that showed up there. Well, that was in Ute land. It still was not even considered territory or the property of Colorado. The Utes went in there. They removed them. They unalived them. Down there near Huerfano Peak or Spanish Peaks area, settlers moved into that valley there before the coming into territory of Colorado and the state of Colorado. They moved. The Utes went over there, removed them. Why? They were protecting their homeland. They knew what was coming. I hear stories, and I read them over there by Aspen, that the fervor at which the newcomers were coming, they would cross Independence Pass in the wintertime with snow drifts. Single people would come over those drifts down into the Aspen Valley where the Utes were there. That's in the interpretation down there. If you walk around the Aspen community and walk some of those trails, they talk about these stories. To them, it's just a story and the expansion of Western America. To the Utes, these people don't listen. They don't honor their leaders' words. What are we going to do? We'll defend our homeland. That's one other spot. Southwest Colorado and Utah. There's a fight over there. Again, the Utes defending their homeland. There are other places around all across, and this map I have here just shows you what I believe our homeland was prior to 1870. I have on that all the riverways. Ute communities do have energy resources. Southern Utes are quite fortunate. We used to have a great deal, but ours is diminishing. So what is our strategy nowadays? That's what the tribal council and the people are going to try to figure out going forward. I don't know, because I've been away from my reservation for a long time. I'm not part of the leadership, so I await what answers comes from council and their direction of where they want to go. But keep in mind, we do share things. Back in the 1950s, I think it was the Indians Claims Commission, we won a very important case there, and we received millions of dollars. At the time when we received those dollars, my grandfather and my grandmother were in council. They decided to take some of those dollars. They invested it in building a recreation center, Olympic-sized swimming pool, steam room, weight room, cafe, offices, and everything else. I grew up in that area in the 1960s with all of that available to me. Basketball court, gymnastic equipment, everything you think. I thought that was in every reservation. No, I learned that the Navajo reservation didn't receive anything like this. Almost 20, 30 years later, I had the fortunate opportunity to be able to live in a place where I had everything available to me. And so my leaders in certain things make decisions and are resourceful. So resources, human resources, our people, our education, our culture, that's our value, and that's where we need to go forward, because we are still a part of this community, which is the state of Colorado.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much for those wonderful answers. Did you want to add something, Cassandra?
Yes, yes, I do. So here's the interesting story, is that when Mr. Whyte was talking about where the reservation was, the first Ute agency, the first Los Pinos agency was, there's three of them. The first one was by Gunnison, and that has the largest contingency of peeled trees, scarred trees. And that is why Ute people make claim to that, because it was documented. They did core boring, tree boring of it, and dated that. And they dated that trees to the same time of occupation of when that first Ute agency was, when you see the peeled ponderosa trees. So that's why, that's our documented evidence to say that that's what we do. That's a practice that Ute people did when you see those scarred ponderosas, because they would have been dated to that. The interesting thing about that, though, was that when I worked there, when I was a tribal historic preservation officer, the NAGPRA coordinator, I went out onto the landscape, and we went there, and part of the soldier story account that the archaeologist told me was that the agents were moving the Ute people over there by Gunnison, trying to take them to that Ute agency. And when they went there, the Utes saw that there was snow on those mountains and they couldn't get over, and they said, over that way, and they said, no, we're not going to go any further. And they tried to harangue them and push them and everything, and the Ute people said, no, we're going to stay here. So they left them there, and they let them stay there. So that's why we were outside that 36 parallel for that reservation, because them Ute people said no. So they left them there in that Ute agency, that first one, that Los Pinos agency by Gunnison is where it is at, is because those Ute people refused to move anywhere because they knew better. It's just like when he went is it John Fremont? When he went over and Pikes Peak, and went to go there and got lost. And then the Spanish, they said they came and picked him up. It wasn't, do you know who found him when he was coming over there by sand dunes? It was the Ute people. And they found him because he was lost when he was trying to explore, and they sent him to Santa Fe to go turn them over to the Spaniards, because that was Spanish territory at the time, or Mexican. So that's kind of those interesting things that come out about Ute people. The other thing is that when those Spanish people were coming out, yes, we did. There's hard stories about the San Luis Valley, about running, because how would you feel if you go back into the mountains and you come here and you're living in this lowland, and you leave and you go back to the mountains and you do all your fishing where we're at now during the summer times, and you come back to the lowlands in the summer times and in the winter times, and there's people living there now. How would you feel? You're going to defend it. So the stories about the Ute people in the San Luis Valley and the Hispanic community is not a very good one. There's some very chilling stories that come out of there. And so that was why, like Mr. Whyte, to reaffirm what he said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have that one.
Thank you very much, Cassandra and Donald. Our next question we have is on environmental and climate resilience. So how do Ute traditions of hunting, gathering, and storytelling continue or adapt in the modern world, and what efforts are the Ute tribes making to address environmental impacts of climate change?
You want to go first?
Oh, I'll step into it.
Okay.
Hunting and gathering and storytelling. This is very, very valuable to any tribal group. You need to know, first of all, where you come from and who you are. We've been placed in a reservation system. That is not where we come from. It's a part of it. If you look at this map over here, or over on this side, you'll see the areas that we consider our homeland. Now, if you put up other tribal groups in there, they will have their view of their use area and their homeland. It overlaps. But the thing is, this is where we need to know where we come from. There were 13 Ute bands, got whittled down to 7, and now down to 3 modern-day Ute tribes. But we need to know where we come from, where we live. Hunting is very important in any hunter-gatherer society. The worth and value of individuals who are successful are noted. Families are doing great because they have a food source they know how to extract. The gathering of plants, berries, and other items, roots and all of that are very important. That knowledge is key in the survival of the people, and sometimes it's not just surviving, it's just thriving. We know that when people can create beadwork, pottery, other items, when they have time, then they're not under stress, they're living, they're a part of the land. And that's where I think it's very important that we know. And among our people, the agencies that got set up were in certain spots, and they were trying to remove us to where we are present day. But you can still go and see some of these places. Matter of fact, south and east of Gunnison, there's a ranch there, out there, and it's called the Agency. It's taken off the Los Pinos Agency, and right alongside that private property ranch is Forest Service land. And on that section of land, there's Ute presence, because that's where they stayed when they were there. I know where I come from. I know my land. I walk to these places. I've been in the White River drainage. I've been to the Yampa River drainage, as long as the Arkansas, the Cashel-Pooter, the Platts, the Uncompahgre, the Dolores, the San Juan. And that's why I put the rivers here, because I want it to be known, and it's never said this way, but the Utes come from the headwaters. We come from the headwaters of the southern Rocky Mountains. We were a strong people because we didn't live right on the mountains all the time, because we followed the seasons. And I only, as a volunteer ranger for the Forest Service, after I left my career in the Park Service, that things really dawned on me, because we had been placed on the reservations and we didn't know what was up in the San Juan Mountains. Well, I carry my backpack, I clear trails, I clean campsites, I meet the visitors, and I see names called Ute Lakes and all of that, and I'm wandering up there at 11, 12, 13,000 feet. Next thing you know, in the summertime, I see wild strawberries. I see raspberries. I know the fish are up near the fish. The animals, the elk, they've all moved up into that area. Well, guess what? When they put us on the reservation, and they really indirectly said, you don't leave that, we lost 2 generations worth of knowledge of the immediate value of our homeland. The whole state of Colorado, the mountains, all of that stuff was removed from us when we were placed on reservations. It's only because of my own legs and me getting out in these places that is our homeland that I know this information. So I try to share that when people want to know that you may have stopped us, but guess what? Every tribal group in Indian country, we all have our taproot. All of the land. They clear cut us, removed us down to the soil, put us there, and kept us down. Well, now many things don't exist to keep us there. Now we're growing, and we're learning about our landscape. And please share with your own people in your own places. Draw that map of your homeland. Draw the physical features, the geography, because all of a sudden you're going to find you're much stronger. And I have an example that we will hopefully have time to put together of what I call time in memorial, that I'll show you my view of how things make us strong.
Thank you. That was great, Don. hunting, as we know, there are different things that women and men can't do, and women can do. And hunting is one of them. Hunting we used to do year-round when it was needed. But we don't do that anymore. Now we have a regulation that says you can only do it in the wintertime. Basically, our hunting season on the reservation starts from September and ends in December, on the last day of December on the reservation. And we're allowed to also hunt in the Bruno area and our Aboriginal homelands of that territory outside the reservation that we were awarded. And hunting is very important. The thing about hunting, though, nowadays is a lot of those old people that grew up on deer and elk and everything, one of the rites of passage when you become a hunter and a young man, after you become a boy to a man, is you go out and you get hunt and you give away your first kill, and you give it to them elders. Well, nowadays we have young people that are doing that, and they're trying to find elders to give that meat to. But them elders don't want them meat because they grew up on it for so long on deer and elk that they don't want it. They don't like it. They said, I don't want to eat that. So they have to find others to do it, give it to. But that's a practice, that's a rite of passage that we also have to recognize ourselves and give thanks and say, okay, a long time ago, they always used to tell me, my grandparents told me, don't refuse anything when somebody gives you food. When you go to visit someone, you always offer them a place to sleep and something to eat. And you always said, and as a person that went to those places, they used to tell us too, when they tell you to eat something, you get up and you go eat, even if it's just a little bit. Don't be rude. That you don't do that. Nikea, they say. Did you understand? You listening? You had to tell them yes. So you went and you did that. That's part of your rites of passage, the way that you live. So when you go hunting, that was one of those things, is to accept it. So we have to do that ourselves. We have to remember as old people to remember to accept those things, because sometimes we've gone too far this other way where we can say no now. But we have to remember them young kids that we're trying to instill something in, they're trying to learn it the way that we were taught and in a right way. And we have to carry that on and encourage it. So hunting is very important. Women hunt now too. My daughter was a hunter for our family. She can't use a gun anymore now. She has to use bow and arrow. But she was a hunter. She's a dang good shot at it. She'd go out there with her grandpa, could drop them. Because they said, that's what you want to do. You want to drop them. You don't want them to run, because that meat's going to taste gamey. Then you have to let it sit. And then they tell us how to hang that meat. You know, you hang that meat and you let it come out. When you hang it with this head down, you don't hang it the other way around. You know, you slit that throat and you let that meat come, you let that blood come out, and you hang it there. But we never go hunting nowadays only till it's really, really cold, because we don't eat the meat right away. So hunting is important. Right now on the Southern Ute Reservation, we share our hunting with other tribes, with the Pueblo tribes. We invite them every year, each different Pueblo, to come up and hunt, to come up and do the doe hunt and a couple of buck hunts. And those tribes, they send their people up to our reservation and they hunt up there and they get their meat and take it back, because we have lots of them. We even have resident deer and pet deer that live in our yards. Hey. And so that's one of the things that you still do, but we do it on a schedule with regulations now. It's not the same as whenever you needed it and you wanted to do it. Hunting and gathering is prayer. Gathering is more, but now we're able to do it when you go out. I've been able to garner that in some places with projects and on federal landscapes of saying, can our people come back? Can we come back here? We're at part of this thing. Can they come and gather these things? If they say yes, you can come out, because you have that right. All you have to do is go ask the BLM or the Forest Service or the thing. Park Service is a little bit different because you can't get minerals. All you can gather depends on that park superintendent about what you can get from that land. So now those are those things that you have to consult with or talk to about before you go out there and get permission. Gathering is a whole different thing. We gather things, but what's there anymore? We are losing our sage plant communities, and we're also losing the ability to identify that. And what do I mean by that? I mean my sage plant communities. There's a certain plant you use for ceremony when you go into meeting, when you go into Sundance. You just don't pick any sage when you go out there. You know, and they call it Artemis tridenta, you know, or the one that comes up from the ground, not on the bush. And there's a certain kind, and you go out there and you approach it. When you approach that plant, you know, you have to always, when you go pick up medicine, anything that you go do, you make that prayer, because they're going to hide themselves from you. Until you open it up, then they're gonna be able to see the things that you need. But you have to be thankful about that. But that's something that has to be learned. You know, you don't just go out and do that. You ever see some white people or Anglo people, they go out and get stuff, they just go pick it up. They don't even pay attention to where they're standing or how they do it or how they approach it. And so that's one of those things. So gathering is important, but there's nothing, you gotta know where to go. And you gotta make sure you don't deplete it. And you also gotta remember your animal relatives. Don't take too much, just take what you need. You know, there's a plant, the bear root, no, we call, you know, Osha. It's called Osha, but we call it bear root. Because that plant was given to us, it only grows in a mountain above 7,000 feet. And in that thing, it's a very particular plant, and people have tried to, domesticate it, I guess, or what do you call it, and grow it on a thing. But that plant won't grow. You can't grow it. It only grows where it wants to. And my mama used to tell us that, my grandma, when they used to take us out there and go pick this plant. They tell us, don't tell everybody where it's at. Don't be showing off when you're going to pick it up. You just go get it. And you only take what you need. And you take it back with you and you use it. But now you see people, now there's the moratorium on the San Juan River, on the San Juan Forest, a moratorium on picking bear root, because people go out there and they gather too much of it, and then they turn around and sell it. We're just as bad, Indian people. We'll go pick it all so we can make some money, they say, but we're also depleting it. I've gone out there and picked that plant one year and went back and there was nothing there. So you go to different places in that mountain so you can gather what you want. Never go to the same place. Gathering is important. Gathering a pinon is important because we know it only comes up 5 to 7 years, depending on if there's a drought year or not, and how that pinon acts. You know, there's different things that we're losing our willow plants. Now, there's a certain type of willow that you utilize when you do Sundance. You don't just pick any type of willow, because if you pick that one, there's that one willow, you have to look at the plant. And that was by doing. So you go out there, my grandma would say, don't get that one. Why not? Because it has them tufts. Why not? Because those leaves are too little. Why not? Because she said, quit asking questions. Do what I say. Look what I'm doing. See what I'm doing. And so I had to do that, and that's what they did. So you did it. So then I had to look. And by God, I'm so glad, because they always told me that, come here. You're going to do it this way. Why? By doing it. And I'm going to let you look at this. See this? This is what you're looking for. Why? Because someday, they said, maybe you're going to be the only one that knows how to do this. Because I don't know what you kids are going to do once we're all gone. I don't know what's going to happen to you. And that's true today. We don't know. Our young people don't know. They don't know what to gather because we got too busy book learning. We got too busy doing this other thing, that we put this stuff that we thought was important aside. And it's important because that's a part of our oral history. And that's who identifies us. We're Ute. We're Indian people. I'm Ute. I'm going to die Ute. I'm never going to be Anglo. I'm never going to be a white man. I'm going to be a Ute. And I should be proud of that. That's my identity. That's what shapes us. That's what makes us strong. And so our people, young people, have to also know that. But they don't know that if they don't have time. And you have to make time. You can't say, I'm too busy. Plants don't wait for you. Trees, those things, those ceremonies don't wait for you to say, I got to go do my hair first, and got to go do this and pick up this first. They don't wait for you. So you have to make time. It's our responsibility to get up and get out there. It's our responsibility to tell our young people this is what it is. But you have to make time and quit being too busy. Sometimes your sports have to take a back seat. Sometimes those things, playing baseball, going to a football game, has to take a back seat to your ceremonies, to the things that you got to go pick up and do, because they don't wait. I did that last year to go pick bear root. You go pick it out a certain time. People want to tell you pick it up in the spring and that. No, you pick it in the fall. after that first storm, after that first cold snap, then you go out there and you look for those plants. Creation and the sun and the planet that tells you when to go, when it's time. And you have to pay attention to it, because if you don't, you're going to miss it. Because I missed it. And I wasn't able to go pick bear root last year because then it snowed and then it keeps snowing and you can't go back to the mountains because it never melted again. It's too high. So those are the things that are there, and then we're losing them. We're losing that identification, and that's what we're here for. That's what we as older people have to do. We're the identifiers. We're the ones that know what they look like, and we're losing it if we don't keep it up. And that's what storytelling is, and I don't like that word storytelling, because there's no such word as storytelling. That's oral history. It's knowledge. It's learning. Those things, they end up being like, these are what your Norse gods did, you know, that becomes a legend. Then you want to say that, and it diminishes the value when you call it storytelling. Then when the white people, when the people hear storytelling, oh, that's not real. I don't need to believe it. So we need to quit calling it that. It's not storytelling, it's our oral history. It's the knowledge that we pass on. It's the things that we do. In the wintertime is when we tell, and maybe it is, we tell these stories. We tell the things about what happened in animals to our kids so they will learn. We quit doing that. Wintertime is a time when you be quiet, and that's when you're able to tell that oral history, our origin, how we came to be. First story you tell in the wintertime is your origin story, how we came to be. You people have no migration story. Other tribes do, but we don't. We've always been in the mountains. We are a mountain people. The mountain sustained us. The bear taught us what to live off of. The animals taught us where to go. We stayed with them. We followed them. The plant people did that. And that's why we were so hard to find. That's why it was so hard to round us up as Ute people. When Colorado was screaming, Utes must go, in the 1800s, they couldn't gather us up because New Mexico territory was screaming the same thing, because the Muwach and the Caputas were down there in Tierra Amarilla, over there at that agency. All these different things. So these are good because those oral histories tell us, and they tell you who you are and where you come. Because Don's right, and we always say that. We all know that. They always told us that. Don't matter where you live, but know who you are and where you come from. So that way you'll never be lost, they said. That's why they put that, when they put that belly button away, and they go put it down so you be grounded. You know, that's the reason why you do that. Those aren't just myths. Those aren't just superstitions to follow. Those are things that are real to us because it connects us to the intangible. It connects us to that other realm, because that's who we were as a people. We could talk to them. Somewhere along the way, we got so arrogant, we forgot how to talk to the animals and to the plants, that we can't hear them no more. Our songs were made on the wind. That was where you go, when they tell you where to go. That's not a story. You tell your uncle when you get ready to go dance, and you have your dreams. Those old men, those uncles and those grandpas, they take you out there wherever you're supposed to go, where they used to go. Tell you, sit out there for this many days. Do this, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it. And then you do it and you follow it. And with that comes that learning, and with that comes that spirituality. If you open your mind and you still for a little bit and learn to be quiet. And it's hard sometimes in this world, modern world, to sit there and be quiet and just to take it in. But we have to do that, because I do the same thing, and I have to remind myself. So the morning time, you get up, storytelling, it's prayer, whatever you call it. I call it oral history, I call it knowledge. You get up and you tell them that. You get up and you make your prayer over there. Lay down your water. My grandma used to say that. Go give yourself some water, those plant people and those spirits that have gone on. That new day right there, go give your water and your tobacco and your little bit of your food that you ate for breakfast. You don't got to give them everything every time, just that one day, so that way you be able. That's that little simple prayer. Young people, they ask, how do I pray? What do I do? It's simple. It comes from your heart. I used to tell them that. I tell them that because that's what they told me. Maybe there's a certain song for a certain way that you're supposed to do things for a certain ceremony, and you do it that way. But for the most part, when you're trying to learn, you keep it simple, because that's how you learn, as a baby step. And we're teaching our kids baby step because they have to learn, because they're living in a world now that's crazy, that's trying to make them forget who they are and where they come from. And it's hard for us to try to teach it and instill it to them because they're too busy being too busy. So it's very important, and it shaped our communities, and we're trying to revitalize these things. And it's, we need to think about how our environment, what we're doing to it. We talk about water rights and things like that. Water is becoming diminishing because there's too many people on the landscape trying to take it all. Each other, I want this one, I want this much, I want this much. That water's flowing and it gets littler and littler. So, you know, those things, that environmental issues that are happening in cultural burning. You know, we had a fire, we used to do that. Mother Nature would burn everything up. And then we go back and pick the plants and go back and look at it and see what came up the next year. Because sometimes those plants, some things need fire in order to come through. And you need to do that. So you go back on that landscape. So we need to come back to what's cultural burning. I got 10 minutes, I can talk. Hey? Anyway, that's what I gotta say. Thank you.
And for timekeeping, we'll add 5 minutes because we did start a little bit late, so we'll go with Jackie. Okay, we are into our Q&A for the audience, and I know that folks haven't been itching to ask questions, but if there are questions, I would like to turn it over to you. If there are not questions, I do have one last question that I can ask, but does anybody have any burning questions to ask? Yes, Trini. Oh, can I get a staff member to take a microphone to Trini, please? Thank you. Thanks, Liz. Thank you.
All righty. My question is to both of you. This has been a big, divisive thing for the Native community, especially in the Denver area. What are your thoughts on the state park access bill that the Ute tribes that was passed this year by, I don't even know, state of Colorado?
What do you think about the access to state?
Oh, that's right. September 6th, because of the legislation and the legislators getting together and agreeing to and passing the legislation to allow the 2 Ute tribes to be able to enter a state park by just showing their tribal ID. That's a good step, but also I believe we also have other tribal members who are a part of this landscape because of the way they look at it as being the only 2 remaining tribal groups in the area. Maybe at some point we can shift that a little bit, but I don't know. That's up for the state to make that decision. Also, the other thing too is that if you go to Rocky Mountain National Park, you can show your tribal ID card and you do not have to pay attention to the timed entry or make reservations. They recognize that in the Park Service as you go through the various areas. So there are 2 checkpoints. The one thing we've got to keep in mind, and again, I'm a park ranger. I know the rules and regulations and how we would hope that the visitors who take advantage, or I'll correct that, for those people who have received that acknowledgement and have that privilege to be able to go into those areas, keep in mind that that is a privilege. So as you go to recreate, or you go in to carry on ceremony, or you go to learn the knowledge of the land, just keep that in mind as you take your families and you say, this is a unique thing, because remember, if we abuse it, they can remove it. So look at these things and take care of that. I think it's a good thing that we have that, because one of the things that happened with the Bruno Agreement, in that area, there were a couple of state parks that I didn't get a chance to try and see if I could use my tribal ID card to go in and go fishing to see if that would have been recognized. Because it was my father who, through his knowledge, decided to take that deer for 100 years, we didn't take that. And all of a sudden, my dad made that step. And that story in itself of how he came to that decision is something that I will share with my family and other tribal members, because it's important, because it's that history of how we gain the energy, the knowledge, and the fortitude to make that step forward if you believe you know something. The state has made the correct step. We just got to make sure we protect that privilege.
I was a part of that. So being a NAGPRA coordinator for the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and being the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Southern Ute Indian Tribe, you're on the ground a lot and you go out on the land and we walk and you speak with the archaeologists. It's not your leaders that really go there and that are always there. I'm not in leadership either. That's where I worked at until April. In April, I left my position. I resigned due to my health and some things that were going on. But I'm still very involved, but I think that was a good step because that was something I always said, and it was something that came out of consultation. Whenever I'd be in consultation, it would be, why do we have to pay to come back into our own land? Why do we have to get permissions when we talk to sand dunes and we talk to Rocky Mountain, when we talk to all these different ones? We'll be like, why do I have to get permission to come back to my own lands? Why do I have to get permission to pick the things that were already on my lands? I didn't ask to leave here. You guys made me leave. And that was the things that became it, and that became a conversation. When I talked to Skylar Rohrabaugh from Pikes Peak and up on there, and that was the same conversation that I used to have with him. Was why do we have to do that? How come we have to open that up? And I could only speak for me as Ute people when I was doing that. I couldn't speak for other tribes because that's up to those other tribes to come in and do that. And so I can't speak for everybody. I can only speak to who I was employed with and who I'm a part of, because I can't tell nobody what Lakotas do or anybody else does, because that's not who I am, and that would be an infringement. Because who the heck am I to talk about anybody else? So I could only speak to that. And as being a Ute person, that was always, why do we do that? And Skylar's like, yeah, you're right, let's work on that. And then that became a conversation, and I guess that was other conversations that were already being held on other places, on other fronts. But it's something that came to fruition. And I know it's been contentious. And it's contentious in that, but for a long time, we were also contentious as Ute people. We were being invisible. Our people and our leadership had quit being that, and everybody in the state, nobody knew who a Ute was. Nobody knew that there were even Utes here. We were very diminished. We were very, by other tribes that were already in the state, by Lakotas, Arapahoes, and Cheyennes. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying that we were not being recognized as being Ute people and being part of the state, even though that we had 2 reservations as residents. And so so that became a forefront, and that became a fight. And so being a part of that and being there and being able to have that access, that I think is a good thing. Can it be improved? Sure. Can other tribes do that? But that's a different conversation to be had at another level between everybody. Between that leadership and between that thing and the people that are working in the ground in those cultural resources departments to bring forward that. But you have to be adamant, and that's the thing. You can't just sit there and accept it. It's a question. And that's the one thing I think that I did, especially if my grandma used to get after me and tell me to quit asking questions, was I would always question. And so I think it's a good thing. I like it. I know that it's contentious. I know that I was a part of that part of having those conversations, and I think that we can be built upon.
Thank you very much, Cassandra and Donald. We have time for one more question. Does anyone else have a burning question that they'd like to ask? I see Beverly's hand. Thank you, Liz. Round of applause for Liz, everybody.
Hi, thank you for everything that you have shared. Being non-enrolled, from being told 1865 was my last living relative, who is Ute from Pondo, Colorado. My question is, how do we unite where we've been segregated and separated because I'm not enrolled in the tribal nation? I'm looking for, like, how can we unite in that space? Because I'm not considered Ute tribal because I don't have a living relative to take the blood quantum. So then how can I be involved, or how can my family be rekindled with the traditional medicine that we have been denied? Not just from government, but just because of the erasure of our culture.
I hear your question, and enrollment is an issue that is very important to you and certainly to the tribe going forward, because we do know that things are changing and shifting, and Utes are intermarrying and all of that, and so there's a lot going on. But I have no answer, because the answer has to come from, is it an enrollment committee that sets the standard. I can't address, it has to come from them. They make those decisions, and I leave that, I would leave that for me, to the grandmothers and mothers, because they're the ones who carry forward the people. And so that's all I can say, because I have no answer. That has to go to the committee.
I would have to agree with that as far as getting the answer. The other thing is, look through your family history and your oral history about who your family is, and go up to them and come to Bear Dance or something and talk to people. You're still a descendant, you know. And as a descendant, and we have lots of descendants that are better, that are more traditional and involved and dance and everything than we do. That some of our in tribal membership that are enrolled don't participate. So just because you want to participate and you're a descendant, maybe looking towards your family and trying to find out where through your tree about how to do that, and then utilize that beside on the outside fringes of going through to politicize the democracy or the bureaucracy of having to be enrolled, because I don't have an answer for that. There's certain stringent things that I can't do. I can't empower.
Thank you both so much for your responses. Did you have go ahead.
My question is, since we're all indigenous, we're all Native Americans, different tribes, and I think a lot of that issue about being indigenous, being Native American and having the blood quantum applies to all the federal recognized tribes in the entire United States. And as a measure of ACEs, the Indian Area Society, this year we're supposed to go to Minneapolis, Minnesota, for the students, like they're going to school, getting their education so they can get a good job in a company, in the corporate world. And a lot of, kids, enter ACEs, trying to get somewhere to see if they can get sponsorship, like scholarships, so they can go make it to the school and they go get a good job. And I think all that applies to us. And they say there'll be an embassy built here. I think at 58 at Penn Boulevard, we're going to have our first indigenous embassy. So I'm thinking, we should upgrade and just kind of like maybe all the nations just join together, just start moving forward. Just like as one big family. Because we're all like, everybody today is like maybe I'm half Ute or half Navajo or half Pueblo or half Cheyenne or half Sioux, whatever. We're still in that blood quantum stuff.
Any comments to add to that? No. You do have to close out, but no, do you have a comment?
I'm good.
I don't have a.
Thank you very much for those comments. Go ahead, Cassandra.
I think that I know that everybody's half this or half that, and I also want to think that it's important that when you're teaching your children to teach them from which tribe you're teaching what they're getting their stuff from, because we're starting to do that, and we are intermelding, and you have elders that say that's not what we do, that's this way, that's Lakota, that's not Ute, that's this way, or that's that we don't do that. So I think it's also important when you're going to intermeld and teach your children something, that you're telling them what I'm teaching you. This is what our Ute people did. This is how we did it. This is what your Navajo grandma does, or this is how we do it this way. Because you learn those things when you're growing up, and you're just like, you automatically. Nowadays, if you're doing it, sometimes you don't know and you're crossing it. And I say that because our Ute people, we never hung things in trees. We didn't put stuff up in the trees to let you know, because we were trying to be hidden, right? We didn't want anybody to find us. We were so good at not being found. So I think it's important to do that as an indigenous community. Also, yes, and unite, but also to remember that what you're teaching your children isn't a combined learning, but it's specific to what that tribe, to your tribe. So that way, when they're learning it and they're teaching it to their children, we're being concise, we're being consistent and they're being conscious about what it is you're learning. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. We do have to wrap up, but I do want to share a reminder that we have comment cards and pens on the table for a reason. Our panelists and presenters have some homework after this, and we will collect your questions so that they can respond to your questions. And then we will send that out in a post report as an appendix before the end of 2025. So first, I would like to say thank you tremendously. I'm honored to be here and to moderate this panel. Thank you both very much. Can we get a round of applause?